It's Christmas time! You will notice I have a tree and I have turned the lights on just so that you can appreciate this wonder. I love Christmas trees. They're my favorite thing about Christmas is the trees and the lights. So I don't really have anything in particular to say or talk about, but I really want to know what God is doing in your guys' lives, so I thought I would just make a video and say to post back and tell me whatever's going on in your life and how you're seeing God, or what you need prayers for. Any verses that have been significant to you, maybe something you've been learning at youth or in your own personal devotions if you've been doing those. That would be cool to hear about. For me, I thought I would just share with you a couple things that God's been showing me. There's Christmas music in the background. I thought it would go with the mood. I don't know if you can hear it. I don't know if it's too loud. If it's too loud, I'm sorry. I just love Christmas. Okay, so I've been reading Ecclesiastes, and on some level, Ecclesiastes is kind of hard to read because it's very brutally honest. But it focuses a lot on relationships, and I don't really know much about like the historical background. I just know that it's King Solomon who's writing it, and he was kind of on like a search for the bigger meaning of life, and trying to figure out like what exactly God wanted for him or something like that. But in chapter 4, one of my favorite verses is, "Two are better than one because they have good return for their word." Because they have good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls down and has no one to help him up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And at first reading a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken, I thought like, oh, like friendships of 3. But then in my study, in my Beth Moore study on David, it's great. There's a study devoted to David and Jonathan, and in David and Jonathan, it says that their friendship was orchestrated by God, and that's why it was so fantastic, because they had both made covenants towards each other, which was just like they dedicated themselves to serve each other. And I thought that was pretty cool. But in reading this verse, it made me think of David and Jonathan, because it wasn't necessarily the 3 strands that it was like a third person. To me, it was like the third person is God. And I saw it as every friendship, just with one-on-one, is really a friendship of 3, because your friendship should be ultimately like doing the best to serve God. Because I think I've mentioned before, it's not about the other person, it's about what God would say and about God. And that was so revolutionary to me, because I started looking at all my friendships and thinking, wow, I have a lot of complex friendships if you think of them all as a friendship of 3. And people will say, I don't know if you've heard this, but they say that friendships of 3 are some of like the hardest friendships. And then in thinking about that, and me, a friend, and God, I guess it is really hard, because you have to stop thinking about that person sometimes and be thinking about God, or stop thinking about yourself in order to put the other person first. But it's weird, because it's supposed to be like God, that person, yourself. And because you're at the absolute bottom, I can see how still that relationship of 3 is the most trickiest thing, because you're at the bottom. And we are created selfish. We have desires, we have cravings, and God's made us that way, but he's supposed to fulfill those things and not like that other person. But anyway, so that was kind of cool about that verse and bring about David and Jonathan. And then again in Ecclesiastes, back about friendships. I read something in Proverbs that says, "Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses," which is just like in those friendships. I see them as like David and Jonathan friendships. One of the things that it said about David and Jonathan was that they weren't easily offended by each other, and they weren't afraid to say, "Okay, this is where you're falling short, or like this is where you're hurting me, or I feel like you're doing something wrong," and they're not afraid to do that. And I think I'm afraid to do that in a lot of my friendships. But just thinking that wounds from a friend, so one of my friends hurting me, that's better than somebody else flattering me all the time and it being like a perfect relationship, because that means that they're not afraid to be open and honest with me, and they care enough to say like, "Hey, you mess up." And my pastor said that it's the ones who love you the most who will do this, and because they have the courage to do that. And then I was like, wow, like courage in friendships is something that I think is underestimated. So, and back to Ecclesiastes, I don't know where I was going with this one. In chapter 5, it talks about, it says, God gives a man wealth and possessions and enables him to enjoy them, to accept his lot and be happy in his work. This is a gift from God. He seldom reflects on the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with the gladness of heart. This was cool because I've been in a really busy time with school doing papers and exams. I have one more paper due and then I have 3 exams still. And I remember there was one point where I was sitting there thinking like, "Dad, can you please just write my paper for me?" I actually wrote my little prayer board, "Daddy, actually, can you please just write my paper?" Which this is cool because the paper that I was doing at that time was on John Milton's Paradise Lost. And John Milton was a Christian. And it was like, I don't even remember the actual dates, but I guess I should because I should be paying attention to that in class. But he wasn't referred to as a Christian then. It was called Puritan. There was like Puritan religion, and there was Catholicism and Protestant, and like Puritan was a branch of like Protestant religion. Anyway, so but he was like a hardcore Christian, and he believed that his mission in life was he had to send out the message of God to readers, and so he wrote this big epic poem called Paradise Lost, and I had to write an essay on it. And I wrote my essay on it's complicated, but to sum up, I just talked about how Adam and Eve in the story. The story is basically like a hyped up version of what happened with Adam and Eve and Satan and Christ, and how the fall happened. And that's all it talks about. It just talks about like how when Eve put the apple and how Satan tempted her, but it goes on for like pages and pages and pages about what Satan actually said to Eve and what Adam and Eve said to each other. It's a lot of like conversation. And what I said was that the relationship between Adam and Eve was kind of like a smaller version of what Satan and Christ's relationship should have been. Now there's a few different details in the book, but my final point was just basically that through looking at Adam and Eve's relationship and comparing it to Christ and like what he's done, I said that it's evident that God desires a relationship with each of us, and that each individual person on earth is significantly important. And the whole reason that God sent Adam and Eve to die for them was because of God's grace. And I said that being that Adam and Eve had fallen and they were in the fallen earth, when Christ came and did that like little act of grace and spoke to them, they were so excited that he did that they just had joy in everything, and they thought, okay, we're just gonna make the best of it now in this dreary, awful land. And that angered Satan, because they were making the best out of living in junk. and he wanted to be miserable just like him. And so I said that it was Adam and Eve's joy of the Lord that defeated Satan and that kept Satan from being able to bring them down into hell. And that's what I wrote my paper on. I mean, it's kind of confusing, but after that, and how I've been learning a lot about joy, Jesus clearly just wrote my paper after I prayed about it. Weird. So, that's cool. That's been going on in my life. And more from Ecclesiastes. I read the other day. I was having a rough day, and this was a weird verse. It says, "Sorrow is better than laughter because a sad face is good for the heart." I read this and I was like, "What?" But then at the same time, it's kind of a huge relief, because then I'm thinking, okay, I don't have to feel so guilty. I don't have to feel like such a bad Christian for being sad. And not that I feel like a bad Christian, I always feel guilty because I think, man, I should be appreciating what God has given me more. Or I shouldn't be dwelling on this. I should be focusing on bigger things and serving God. But instead I'm sitting here being sad. I'm wasting so much time being sad. And then I read, "Sorrow is better than laughter because a sad face is good for the heart." And then I thought, it's good for the heart? Like, how is being sad good for the heart? And it talks about how the people back then, they valued suffering and sorrow because, like, it was a refining fire and it refines your heart. And we learn more about God from difficult times and happy times, and that we should see our struggles as an opportunity to learn from God. And I was like, oh, I kind of already knew that, but I kind of forgot. And that happens to me a lot. I'll know things and then I'll forget them. And then God's always like, "Don't you forget that I told you this once upon a time." And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. And then Ecclesiastes 7:13-14 says, "Consider what God has done. Who can straighten what he has made crooked?" And then I thought, okay, so these rough times, he's made rough for a reason. And I can't fix it. But I can learn from him in this time. I can figure out what he's trying to teach me. And I was like, huh. Wow, that's cool. And Ecclesiastes talks about the man who fears God will avoid all extremes. So not like taking one thing, working on like one aspect of their life and doing that to the complete extreme, to the point where you forget about all the other little things that you should be working on. Like, let's say I want to devote myself completely to learning about how to be wise, or learning about what wisdom is. Well, personally, I think then that I'm forgetting about all the other things God could be teaching me, because like he could be teaching me just that. But I can't forget about serving others and how to love others and grace. Like, I have to keep in mind all these things. And Ecclesiastes says that balance needs to happen. Like, balance is really important in order for like righteousness to happen or something. And then this was awesome. Ecclesiastes 7:21-22 says, "Do not pay attention to every word people say, or you may hear your servant cursing you. For you know in your heart that many times you yourself have cursed others." And in another version, it talks about eavesdropping and listening to what other people are saying, because you might hear them gossip about you. But I kind of interpreted this as, yeah, like, not eavesdropping, but also in just hearing people say bad things about you, or hearing insults, like, not, or feeling personally insulted even if they don't mean to do so, just to keep in mind that I've probably insulted them, and I've surely gossiped, and I've surely said things about other people too. So why judge them and get as in big, like a really big huff because they've said something bad about me, when I've said probably things that I shouldn't have said before too. So just remembering that in those situations, and that made me think, being like, okay, I heard this person told this person this about me, and I have an issue with that. But then to remember, okay, I kind of talk like this too sometimes. and so then it says like don't pay attention to every word people say, and so that kind of was reassuring, and I could be relieved because I was like, okay, so maybe I just don't pay attention to that, because like I'm guilty of that too, so whatever, you know what, and then I saw that as an aspect of grace, and she likes to teach me a lot about grace. And another fun thing I read in Ecclesiastes 7 was, I constantly write in my prayers, show me, Daddy, show me. I want you to show me. And I had written this in my prayer, and then Ecclesiastes 7:27 says, look, says the teacher, this is what I have discovered. So it's almost like he was saying to me, look, Whitney, like, this is what I'm trying to show you. This is what I'm trying to teach you. This is what I've discovered about you, okay? Or he already knows this about me, but so I was like, huh, cool. That's weird. And I read in one of my little notes in my study Bible, it says, wisdom is the ability to see life from God's perspective and then know the best course of action to take. And that was cool to keep in mind, because it does say that we're supposed to strive towards true wisdom, but like not become like too self-righteous and thinking that we are wise. But it's just something we should always be striving towards. And so that was kind of cool to think about it, you know, and striving towards what wisdom really means is trying to look at a situation the way God would look at a situation, and what the Bible says how he judges the situation, and then thinking about what to do. It's like, wow, that's deep and insightful and helpful. So that was cool. And yeah, so that's pretty much what God's been teaching me. I haven't read Ecclesiastes 8 yet. Today in church we were talking about David and how David's life looks like it's perfect, but really it was messed up. So, and one of the things my pastor said was that, like, at the end, was that overall, like, when things get confusing and hurtful, love listens. Like, and then he said, like, are you listening to people who need you to listen to them? And then he also said that love speaks. So, like, what's a word that we need to say to someone? And he said, like, love's a verb. It's an action. And I was like, huh, cool. That's interesting. So that's a whole lot of, like, random stuff. But that's just what he's been showing me. I don't know what he's been showing you guys, or if you guys can relate to any of that, but it would be cool if you posted videos and shared what he's doing in your life. I know that some of you have been doing basketball tryouts and sports and plays, and, like, I know people are going on missions trips and planning for that, so just, like, post videos about that and how your life's doing. One other thing. This is just a fun little fact. My friend wrote a book. It's called A Blind Perspective, and it just came out, and it's about how she was blind. She lost her sight in high school for a period of time, and she was blind, and then all of a sudden she got her sight back. So I haven't finished reading it, so I don't want to tell you how it goes really until I'm done reading it, but it would be really cool, and I could probably mail you guys a copy at some point if you're interested. But yeah, how sick. I know someone who wrote a book. I'm so proud of her. It's awesome. Okay, so that's pretty much all I was going to say. I hope you guys are doing well, and let me know if there's anything you would like me to address or talk about or not talk about, and if you're not really enjoying me posting videos all the time. I take any kind of feedback, so I'm just really blessed that we can keep in touch, because I talk about you guys to people all the time. You don't even know. It's a huge blessing. So, yeah. Merry Christmas! I will definitely talk to you guys again before Christmas, but my Christmas lights. Bye!